kind of brag on Steve. If you don't know Steve, do you even work here? No, I'm just kidding. However, Steve's helped over 153 families in a month on his own personal pen, and his group's helping over 700 families a month. So if you're asking if you're on the right call, listening to the right person, there's not a better person that you could be leaning in and listening to. So grab a pen and paper if you don't have one already. I know I have mine ready to go. But with that being said, Steve, again, thank you so much for being on with us today. And just to kind of intro the call, a little bit about yourself, kind of where you're from, what got you into FFL, and what you were doing before that.
Well, that was a hell of an introduction, first of all. So thank you. I, before FFL, worked, I wanted to be a chef actually, when I was in high school. And then I went to culinary school and then got a business management degree and worked hospitality pretty much for about 15, 16 years, and got into insurance because I wanted my own business. Truth be told, I got sick of having somebody tell me what to do. I didn't do well with that. As you were kind of, going up the corporate ladder in restaurants, and lo and behold, Warm Market knew Mark Mead and saw what he was doing in the industry. I liked financial services. I just didn't really know how to get into it. And then he kind of showed me the platform, showed me, the lead structure and the way things worked. And I pretty much kind of just jumped into it because I just knew change had to happen and quickly.
Absolutely. And that's a great answer, Steve. It's like, we all come from different backgrounds, but when you need a change, you need a change, right? And I think that alone sticks out, right? Like you knew Mark, like you said, you knew financial services, but you weren't necessarily on the ins and outs. It was more so that warm market source that you said, hey, I know him, I can trust him, lead guide direct. It's not that deep, right?
Yep.
So love that, Steve. And, obviously you write at a very high level, and I've always respected that. But with that being said, when you first kind of came into the insurance industry, were you always helping, over 50 families a month, or was that something you kind of eased yourself into?
Yeah, I eased myself into it. I think I knew this in the beginning. I knew, okay, this is how we get paid. So let me focus on the things that are going to get me paid. So I also listened to my mentor when he told me, okay, you need to be diverse in your leads and not just count on one thing, and also not be cheap with them. So on my first month, I probably spent about 4,000 in leads, through, and we didn't have instant internet leads. Back then, me and you, we had to walk up and down the hill barefoot. We didn't have all the things that we have today, right? So it was like, Facebook final expense, a little bit of EverQuote. And then I started like a small mortgage mailer and spent about 4,000 and protected about 21 my first month. And then I kind of just learned this equation. If I spend more in leads and work harder and get better, I'll write more insurance. So then the next month, month 2, spend 5, write 34. Then I spent like 55 or 6 and I wrote 57, and then upped it a little bit more and wrote like 80. And I just kind of like lived in that world of you spend more, you work hard, you make more.
Absolutely. And that comes back to everything in this business, right? Because when you say it like that, Steve, it's like, okay, is it really, it's that flat line simple. And it really is. Like, I have the same story you just gave in terms of personal production and how it went higher or lower, or kind of what that looked like. But saying, you have to just work harder, buy more leads, take direction, and being willing to learn and just willing to fail. Like when people hang up on you till this day, Steve, like, do you care?
I do, because everything annoys me, but I don't. To answer your question, to your point, I had a guy yesterday tell me, oh, I don't want to do that, I'm not interested, right? So I put him in a pile door knock, and today I see it in the pile. I called him and I booked him for Saturday. So I mean, you got to always remember when you call people, they could have just had like the worst moment of their life and you have no idea. But it doesn't mean they don't want insurance. It just means like they're not interested at that moment, if that makes sense. And that's where the work comes in, where you're actually exhausting the leads.
It does, and that's so true. There's been so many times I've called leads and I called them back by accident, or maybe I reprinted it or whatever, and I was like, oh, this was the guy or girl who told me to fly a kite yesterday. And it's funny, but it's like you said, you don't know what just happened. So you can't take things at personally and at face value, especially over the phone. But Steve, kind of seeing your organization unfold and seeing you working with your family, seeing Margot there, seeing your mom there, I believe her name's Laura, killing it. It's exciting. But how is that, dynamic kind of helped all of you guys really be able to leverage the opportunity?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And you guys obviously do an amazing job, with each other and your family. I think the number one thing for everybody there is you got to get your family involved, get your circle involved. Now, one of the things you're going to notice when you're in an entrepreneurial background is your circle's going to get smaller. Because if you think about it, for the most part, people that are coming here that, kind of work the 9 to 5 or what have you, their circle is an entrepreneur, so they might not understand. So I think for me, it was very big getting spouse involved, getting, my entire family involved, like letting them know, like, hey, like, we're not going to take a vacation to come up the next couple of years or whatever it might be. We're going to be very strategic in when we do things. My Saturday evenings in the first 6 months, whatever it was, I'm probably running appointments. But what I'm doing is I'm creating financial comfort that we need, which a lot of people obviously come here and need. And I'm going to buy my time back later on. And I'm also going to be able to give a better lifestyle for my family. So that was a big thing. And I think it's a struggle for a lot of people. You got to let people know what you're doing, and you have to have conviction, because if your circle, and it's not about like money always, but if your circle does not make a lot of money or live financially, in a decent place, they're not the circle that you need around you if you're expecting to do that. Now, I'm not saying like don't, cut off friends, but you have to kind of limit, and you have to have conviction around saying, this is what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and what it's going to look like.
I love that. It was like jam packed, because what you're really saying is, the people around you, that's probably who you're going to be most influenced by, right? And if those people, if you're fortunate enough to have them involved in the business, or at least, like you said, you're telling them what's going on, why you're making such sacrifices, and kind of, what it's going to look like in the future, it will make more sense for them. But also, if your circle of influence is, family, friends, whatever you want to consider them, to me, I'm like, same thing. It's like, that's a beautiful piece, because they're going to do one of two things. They're going to come alongside you, or if they're not business minded, so to say, they might be confused if you're not talking to them about what your, day to day looked like or changed, right? So I love that. And I think that you really leverage that to be able to use it for you versus against you, right? Like, you don't use it as an excuse. You and Margot got together and said, we're going to do this. We're going to do this thing together for our family, right? So you don't use it as an excuse, like, oh, well, every Sunday at 2 o'clock, I have to do this. It's like, you have certain things that you have to do. You're living by your non-negotiables, and you're moving forward. So I love
100%.
that. And I respect the heck out of you and your wife. You guys are quite the couple. So I love seeing you out there, you guys out there winning. It's amazing. But you leverage social media, Steve, and I see it all the time. And honestly, I will openly say on this call, we do take a lot of your content ideas because they're amazing. Yeah, so thank you. But with that being said, Steve, why do you leverage social media to that extent?
Yeah, it's so funny because like if you were to tell me, I don't know, 5 years ago, like I was always on social media, but if you were to tell me like posting some of the things we post, doing this on some of the things that we do, it's like that uncomfortability. Like I probably wouldn't do that. But when you look at what we do, and when you think about why you do it, meaning one, yes, of course you're doing it. You want to build a big business and you want to build your audience. But two, there's somebody out there that needs an opportunity that's in your circle. If you go back to your circle, think how many people, me and Mark was a great example from a warm market perspective. Like, they hate their job. Like, let's be real. Most people hate their job. I hated my jobs. I hated having to listen to somebody, hence why I'm here. So if you can now leverage it and put out what it is that you do and why you do it, you can bring someone in. Like, we just brought in it was a warm market gentleman that Margot knew, worked in the car business, got plugged in, got contracted, bang, went out yesterday, made 2 sales, kind of, already recruiting people from the car business. So I think it's important. And I also think our recruiting has evolved, meaning the old way was, hey, let's go get on Indeed and like call 1 million resumes to recruit. But now what it really is let's put out content so people can see what we're doing, and then let's drip on them with it. And then let's connect with them, whether it be like a message or a like or a follow on Instagram or LinkedIn or what have you. That's really what recruiting has now become. Whereas we were kind of doing it the archaic way. Like, because if you think about it, the person on average that fills out a ZipRecruiter or an Indeed, like, they're not necessarily the entrepreneur that you're looking for. You're going to find like one every 500. It's going to be a lot of work for your recruiter or you. But social media, the world is your oyster. If I see that you are an entrepreneur in insurance, do solar sales, you have a background in, if it's, athletics or whatever the case might be, you're able to cherry pick people that are like-minded that will do well in this business. So that's really the power of social media.
Absolutely. And I love how you said it's like, it wasn't that the old, so to say, recruiting process didn't work, but like you said, you had to weed through a lot more to be able to find that quality person. Whereas, bringing in, for example, somebody like Rami onto the, team, me and Rami have known each other for over a decade. So trust is going to it's already going to be there, right? Versus cold market, everything works a little bit, but point being is, like you said, they're not necessarily going to be willing to just jump in like, Margot's friend did and dial and get in the field, because they don't necessarily have that belief in themselves, the company, and you yet, right? So it is a lot of dripping. And what I love about social media, Steve, and you probably see this too, is people will keep looking at your stuff and looking at your stuff, and it is a slow drip, right? However, when someone reaches out, they're typically ready to get going. It's like they looked into the company, they've been looking at your stuff for X amount of time, and they're ready to just hop right into it. And above all of that, what you said too was, you don't know who's out there that needs this opportunity. And that's what will hold me accountable, to make sure that I don't care if I look like a fool on TikTok, as long as it's going to get the message out there to make sure that it reaches X kind of person. Because if you're out there, Steve, working 100 hours in the hospitality business, I know that you can run a business because you're already working hard. So social media, it is the new way to recruit, to hire, to bring quality people in. So if you're not using it, check out Steve's page and you'll see why his team's growing like crazy.
But first they think you're crazy, and then they ask if you're hiring.
That's right. Exactly. So true, literally. And with that being said, when you have a new agent coming in who wants to be helping, 20 plus families a month, are there particular expectations that you're putting in place, or you're just setting?
Yeah, I try to. I think that the challenge becomes, one, in the beginning, you need to find out what the person wants, what their why is, what they're looking to accomplish. And I love when people say to me, like, I want to protect 20, 30, 100. I'm like, we can all give you the roadmap of how to do any of it. But really what I need, it's more what you're going to give it rather than more than what you want. Meaning, you see what I'm saying? Like, meaning you have to, I'll tell you what you need to give it. And then I'm going to tell you what you're probably going to get between number one, lead cost and lead investment. And then number two, time investment of dialing, running, whatever it's in-person, Zoom, telesales, whatever you're doing, and then training. I will give it all to you. So meaning if you want to write and protect over 100, like, you better be ready to work 6 days a week. You better be ready to be on your phone from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and in the field from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Like 6 days a week, all day, every day. And then throw in, if you want to build a business on top of it, doing that stuff as well. We can give you that roadmap. So what I try and do with people new is, like, once they tell me what they want, and then I try to match it up with what they got to give, then we try to find the disconnect. You see what I'm saying?
I love that, because you're working it backwards, just like our numbers. We can eventually work them backwards, but at the beginning, we got to work the goals backwards with the activity. I love that,
Correct.
Steve. So you're saying basically, what are you might want to do this, but what are you willing to actually give, right, to get there?
Some of my biggest months are the months where you feel like you got beat up the most. You want to know why? Because you put in the most activity, you worked the most, you dealt with the most adversity.
And that's how it should be, because it pays out, right? Amen to that, Steve. I'm with you there. I'm like, I can relate. But with that being said, when things get kind of hard in business, right? We all have our days. Define, your hard in business, whatever that might be. What makes you particularly remember why you're doing this? And just to get back to work, and that, like, it's not that deep.
When you have kids now, they need formula, and that stuff is not cheap. You can't even find it. Plus, it's not cheap on top of it. So that's number one now. It actually makes it easier now. I think my goals and everybody's goals don't care about your feelings. And I've always tried to remember that. Meaning, yeah, you can be annoyed that Bob didn't buy. You can be annoyed that you got a no-show. You can be whatever. But at the end of the day, if you put down your goals of what they want to be, and you legit want them, you have to weigh out, does me being annoyed and wanting to, like, quit on the day or the week or the month or the whole thing, is that greater than what the goal is? And that's where I think you can lose some people, and that's where the rubber meets the road. Because this business, if you focus on the fact that all you have to do is constantly talk to people that you've invested money in one way or another to talk to. If you focus on that and constantly just talking to people, and when you don't want to make a call, like, make one more. When you don't want to go to a house, like, do one more door knock. If you operate that way, you're going to not have time to think about the fact that, like, you were annoyed with the person that canceled. Like, you don't have time to worry about it. Like, there's more to do. There's more insurance to write. There's more people to recruit. So that's what kind of keeps me moving. Like, I know what my goals are. I also understand, and you guys have an office and staff. That's a huge responsibility. And then throw in family and regular bills. It's a huge responsibility, and you have to take it very seriously. And that's something that I do, and why I kind of push myself as hard as I do.
Absolutely. And that makes sense. I love how you said, the whole goals don't care about your feelings, that you've tried to remember that, live by that. And I actually just wrote it down, because it's true, and when you're moving fast and you're actually trying to hit a goal, you're actually trying to hit a target, you're too focused on hitting that target than you are focused on what your friend just said about, soccer practice last week. Like, it doesn't matter. It's not impacting you, because you don't have time to be impacted by it. I once heard Sean say, once you start thinking, stop. And he doesn't mean don't think, he just means don't overthink, right? Because it's going to bring you typically down the wrong path, right? So you make sure you don't get there. And baby formula, definitely, I can imagine, is not cheap, Steve. So
It's not cheap.
One other thing. All right. And then, how has the hybrid or telesales or, virtual sales type of model really helped your actual group kind of be able to grow or develop?
It's huge. I was actually just talking about this. So in the beginning, me having, sometimes the archaic mindset, I was like, I'm just in the field. We only do this in the field. We only meet with people. Right. And then I'm like, okay, well, yes, I do believe nothing will ever take the place of human interaction. However, when our world has changed, what I started doing was saying, one, let's say me for personal production, if I run more hybrid, oh, lo and behold, I can sell more. Cool. And I actually probably am at this point. And then two, from an agency building perspective, you have to think about everybody in their situation. Now, the thing that we always have to be careful against is on if we promote or talk about telesales or Zoom, we have to talk about the fact that this isn't you sit in your pajamas and make 5 phone calls and sell, 10 families a week. That's not how it works. You have to, in your brain, say, if I just do strictly telesales, I'm going to dial the phone probably 2.5 times to double, and I'm going to get more rejection. Okay. So I need to, again, in numbers, I need to react accordingly. Like, meaning I was with a guy when I was out in California. He works on our team. He's been doing telesales only, and he's super sharp. And he did, I think it was 19 families his first full-time month, right? And I said, how many days do you dial and how many dials do you make? And he said about 4, and he'll be at about 500 to 600 dials. Okay. So my point being, if you're going to do it, you have to understand those numbers because you're paying for convenience, right? If I go to Bob and Mary's house and I make a connection with Bob and Mary, it was quote unquote a little easier than if you had to call Bob and Mary 9,000 times and maybe you booked the appointment and then had to reschedule it or whatever the case might be. So hybrid is amazing because it opens up the world to you, but you have to play it with the right expectations. That's one of the things that I try and talk about with people on our team. Like, I'm all about it. It's cool, but I'm going to tell you what it looks like. And again, I need you to understand, like, if you're in on it, great. And then if not, maybe we don't want to go that route just for you, if that makes sense.
100%. It's because, like you said, clear expectations are going to make sure that we have clear goals and that we can reach them, right? And I love how you said so when you had mentioned the gentleman on your team, he said he works 4 days and he makes about 500 to 600 dials. And you mean dials per day, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so we're talking about 2,400 dials a week. So
Yep.
Everybody on this call, guys, I want you to realize what Steve just said. Like, those are actual numbers. So if you want to do telesales, Steve, you're paying for convenience, whether that's your
100%.
time, money, and both, right? So if you want to do telesales, absolutely go for it. And like you said, Steve, I'm an in-home person too. So I was like, oh, we can only do in-home, but I know how much it can help a lot of people. And I've been doing hybrid, etc. However, it does, definitely cost more, and the time investment is a lot more vicious. So taking a look at that and saying, do I just not want to work and sit in my pajamas and call it telesales? Or am I actually going to put my head down and make 600 calls a day and not complain about it, right? Like, those are two completely different scenarios. So make sure if you're thinking about telesales or hybrid model that you're just asking yourself the right questions before you're just diving right into that. And then, Steve, if you weren't here, in the insurance industry, what do you think you would be doing?
Oh man, that's a good question. I'd like to say I'd be a professional wrestler, or playing sports. One or the other.
Okay, I could see that. I could definitely see that.
Right?
All
That makes sense, right?
That's a good answer. And then, question I have that's going to be kind of side note, but obviously you're a killer in the home. See, when you go into a home, I remember you said to me one day in a call, you said something like, I'm coming over, like, and I'm gonna help them with life insurance. Like, it's not debatable. Like, if I get, like, what does it look like for you when you set the stage in the home? Like, what does that look like or sound like?
Yeah, and I think when I said that, and it's for everybody, just thinking, if you go there and your mentality is I'm not getting them insurance, like, you've already lost. Like if you think about it, like I meet people sometimes and they'll say, hey, I met with another agent and I got quotes and this and that. And I'm like, well, cool. Well, did they protect you when they left? Because you don't have insurance. And if you die tomorrow, you don't have insurance. So what did the quote actually do? And again, we all know the drill. I don't sell everybody. You don't sell everybody. Nobody sells everybody. But if you mentality wise go into it that way, you're going to sell more people than you don't. And then in setting the stage, you mentioned earlier, kind of overthinking. A lot of agents overthink the hell out of in-home. In-home is about 2 things to me: control and psychology. Meaning when I go into a home, the number one thing I'm trying to do is build a little rapport. Not I'm sitting with you for 30 minutes and we're talking about whatever, but what I'm talking to them about is like asking them questions and getting them talking about things that are pertinent to the appointment. Meaning, how long have you lived here? Do you have kids? What do you do for work? And I just kind of like rapid fire questions to people because it's getting them to talk. It's getting them to trust me a little bit. And then it's also giving me answers to questions that I need for the point of the appointment, right? Because I can use all that stuff. Like I'm not talking to you about just random anything. It's very poignant questions. And then in the simplistic side of things, you know, financial inventory, obviously, I just let them know who I am, what I do, and what we're going to do here today. And I'll say this phrase or something like this. I'm assuming, Bob, you sent this in to make sure that if you die tomorrow, you know, if it's wife or kids, they're not burdened or whatever the case might be, right? So I'm asking you a question that you're going to answer the way I want you to answer it, one way or another. And then I dive right into it and I'll say, you know, it's just simple. We're going to go through health and then we're going to find what fits your budget, right? And I'll just say ever anything major, heart, stroke, cancer. I don't make it weird. I just talk about it. And what are your medications? And I think in control for everybody, if you tiptoe around stuff, people are going to think you're weird. Like meaning if I was a doctor and you came to see me as a doctor and I was like, what's wrong with your stomach? You're telling me your stomach's bothering you. Like, what's going on? You would be like, you'd open up to me and tell me what's going on. But if I was like, like, why are you here again? Like, what's going on? Like you'd be like, what is up with this dude? So you have to play that role. People need to be led. And then, you know, talking about finances, budget, what do they have that acts like life insurance, the golden question, and then talking about beneficiary, and talking about it often and bringing the name up often. You're trying to make things very, very real. The last thing, you know, I'll say to you here, sorry to go long, is when you're underwriting, insurance is not about products, it's about underwriting. Meaning the products, whole life does whole life, term does term, IUL does IUL. It is what it is. Some have a little bit more nuance to it, CBO, whatever, but the nuts and bolts are the nuts and bolts. So the products are kind of irrelevant. The underwriting, however, isn't. Meaning the sale that you make in insurance is me selling Marissa what she can get. If Marissa cannot get a term, why would I ever talk about term? What I should do instead is say how term is the worst thing ever. Because for Marissa, it is, but whole life might be the greatest thing ever. So the sale is me selling you based on what you just told me in your health, budget, all that stuff into one, me telling and guiding you and educating you into why this policy makes the best sense for you. If they have a major health condition and it's accidental only, accidental is the greatest thing in America. If they can get regular term is the greatest thing in America. So when it comes to underwriting, you have to really focus on the underwriting guides as opposed to quote unquote the products. And that's something I really focused on to get good at. And that's why probably more times than not, like when people are like, oh, I don't want this, I kind of can usually, not always, convince them into why this makes sense because it's better off for them.
Absolutely. And that was a lot of information, but a lot of great information. So thanks for kind of diving into that question, Steve, because one thing that I've noticed, if I've noticed anything in the past, almost 8 years of being in the industry, is if you tiptoe, you're weird. Like on the phone, if you tiptoe, you're weird. In home, if you tiptoe, you're weird. Like if you're on the phone trying to book an appointment, you're like, so like, what do you think? Like, it's like, you're going to get hung up on. Like, you're just calling to book the appointment. So the psychology and what's going on through your brain, like, Steve, you're saying, like, okay, did they protect you when they had left? Like, that's a great question that I've never asked, to be honest. But it's a great question because it also shows your stance. Like, hey, well, I'm here to help you today, and this is what we're going to do today. And that's where the control piece comes in, because all you're doing with your client in terms of control is you're leading them to find a solution to their problem. And like you said, Steve, you're finding all that information in the financial inventory. So you're not pitching a product that that client might not qualify for. If you know it's whole life, you're going whole life. If you know it's term, you go in term. You're not in between talking about the CBO to a 79-year-old because you know the 79-year-old can't get the CBO. So it's like, keep what's
Right.
off the table. And then also drop in the beneficiary's name. If you're not doing that, even if it's people's children, things like that, someone's like, I have 5 kids. I'm like, what are their names? They list them off. I try to write them down just like somewhere else so they can't really see it to reference back, like the oldest child, the young, whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, it really does just come down to, can you control your activity? Can you control your thought process when you're on the phone? And can you control your thought process when you're going into the home, right? Because the way that Steve teased that up, I'm pretty sure Steve in there like, and we might just submit an application. Like, no, he's like, we're going to take that application, we're going to get it sent up. We'll have the coverage in place for you. We might have the decision back here in just a minute. That's 2 different approaches.